In the story of our modern world, some nations rise not just with power, but with purpose. And among them, India has become a heartbeat in the global economy. From the buzzing offices of Silicon Valley to the skyscrapers of London, Indian talent shapes the future. CEOs of Indian origin lead some of the most influential companies on earth. In cities across the globe, entire communities speak the language of Indian culture, a blend of tradition and innovation that turns strangers into neighbors. India's rise is not accidental. It is built on decades of hard work on education, on the determination of millions who believe they could compete on a world stage. Today, when the world talks about technology, about medicine, about space exploration, the conversation is incomplete without India. But far from the glow of public achievement in quiet corners of political power, there are conversations that do not seek to celebrate India's rise. Conversations that ask not, how can we grow together, but instead, how can we slow them down? The president of a powerful nation meets often with the Pakistani head of state. The setting is always formal, the flags, the handshakes, the cameras. But once the cameras are gone, the questions begin. What do they truly discuss? Is it cooperation for peace, or strategies that might set the stage for old disputes to rise again? Pakistan is a proud nation with deep history, but it is also a nation facing difficult times, economic struggles, rising costs, political unrest. A moment when leaders could focus on healing their own house. So why, in such a moment, is so much energy spent in discussions abroad? Could the people of Pakistan benefit more from solutions at home than from strategies abroad? And here lies the silent question: is the purpose of these meetings to build peace or to prepare for pressure? Because when neighbors fall into conflict, both bleed, and the wounds take generations to heal. There is another layer to this story, one the headlines rarely show: the environment. In a century defined by climate change, every war fought is more than a political disaster, it is an environmental one. Tanks burn fuel, missiles release poisons into the air, displaced families consume resources in ways that strain the planet. Every dollar spent on conflict is a dollar not spent on clean water, on renewable energy, on the survival of our planet. Peace, on the other hand, brings a different kind of power. When two nations trade, when they share technology, when they compete in ideas instead of weapons, the whole planet benefits. Air stays cleaner, forests grow back. Resources are invested in life, not destruction. And so we must ask, who benefits from a path of war, and who benefits from a path of cooperation? A whisper in the corridors of power. A whisper that president was no longer just playing the game of politics. He was writing the rules of fight. In his eyes, India was not a partner, not a democratic giant, not a growing economy, but a chess piece that had to be weakened before it became too strong. His public speeches told one story, but behind closed doors, the moves were sharper, darker, more deliberate. Pakistan's role in this drama? Not one of pure loyalty or defiance, but of dangerous proximity. They say President sat with those who knew how to ignite old fires, men who could wrap hatred in the language of strategy. And there, in that circle, Pakistan found itself not in the position of a friend, but as a tool, a pawn, a willing listener to a master manipulator. Head of Stat's name surfaced in whispers, a man accused of helping shape the storm, not stop it. A man who could have closed the door on the chaos, but instead, perhaps, left it open just wide enough. The plan was never about one battle, one border skirmish, or one headline. It was about economy. India's economy. A trillion-dollar growth engine, threatening to shift global power away from the West. That was the real fear. If India rose unchecked, America's influence in Asia could fade. And President, for all his bravado, feared a future where the White House did not dictate the terms of trade, of oil, of technology. So the strategy was simple and cruel. Stoke the old hostilities. Use religion, use history, use fear. Push Pakistan and India closer to the edge. The closer they were to fight, the more foreign investors would pull their money out of India's markets. The more India's resources would bleed into defense instead of growth. The stronger the dollar would look in comparison. And all the while, hatred was the cheapest weapon in the arsenal. Social media trolls amplified fake stories. Paid commentators on TV screamed in outrage. Ordinary people, thousands of miles away from the real power tables, believed they were fighting for honor, not realizing they were only helping a foreign script succeed. The irony? Neither side would truly win. Pakistan's economy was already fragile, a fight would shatter it. India, despite its strength, would lose years of progress. And President Saif in a distant land would watch as both nations burned in a fire he had fanned, selling military tools and influence to whoever could pay. In the end, it was never about defending one country or destroying another. It was about profit, control, and the intoxicating power of playing God with nations. And those who knew the truth understood, the biggest war was not on the border. It was in the shadows, in the whispers, in the deals no one voted for. It started as quiet meetings in rooms without windows. President's voice was calm, but the words carried the weight of a plan that could bend nations. He didn't see India as a rising democracy to be celebrated. He saw it as a competitor. A threat to the dollar? A market too big to be left untouched? India's booming tech, its growing alliances, its expanding middle class, all of it signaled one thing: power. And President could not let that power go unchallenged. Pakistan entered the equation not as an equal, but as a pressure point. Old wounds between India and Pakistan were easy to reopen. The right whisper in the right ear, the right promise to the right general, and the flame of hostility could be made to burn again. Head of State's name was spoken in guarded tones, a man positioned close enough to hold the matches. But here was the twist: Pakistan was not truly benefiting. It was being used as the trigger in a gun it would never own. And in the background, watching it all with cold precision, was China. Beijing didn't need to shout. It didn't need to push. It simply understood that if India was distracted by fight, China's own rise in Asia would face one less obstacle. The Belt and Road could expand, trade routes could shift, markets would lean toward the yuan. Every bullet fired between India and Pakistan would echo as profit in Beijing's corridors. President knew this too, but for him, China was not an enemy in this plan. It was a shadow partner. While he played the public role of confronting China in speeches, in private he understood a shared interest: slowing India's growth. The U.S. could keep its economic dominance a little longer. China could remove a rival in Asia, and both could do it without firing a single shot themselves. The method was simple: fuel the old narratives, use religion, use border disputes. Spread disinformation online until truth no longer mattered. India's investors would grow nervous, stock markets would stumble, growth would slow. In the chaos, American and Chinese influence would quietly fill the gaps, but there was a dangerous flaw. This game was not played with chess pieces. It was played with nations, with people, with lives. Pakistan's fragile economy could collapse entirely. India's hard-earned progress could rewind years. China's silence could suddenly turn into open ambition, and America, sitting oceans away, could claim innocence even as the blueprint for the disaster bore his fingerprints. Because in this kind of fight, the real battlefield is not land or sea. It is economy. It is perception. It is the ability to make 1 billion people believe they are fighting for pride, while the true victors are counting profits in glass towers far from the blood and the dust. The answer is not the same. War benefits a few, peace benefits everyone. Today is India's Defense Day. It is a day that reminds us that defense is not just about weapons or walls. True defense is the protection of dreams. The dream of a farmer whose land stays safe. The dream of a student who studies under the light of a stable future. The dream of a soldier who, while ready to fight, hopes that he never has to. India's history is filled with sacrifice. But its future can be filled with something greater: leadership that does not just protect borders, but also leads the world to progress. And so I leave you with a question, not an answer. When history looks back at this time, this year, this decade, Will it see leaders who chose short-term power through division, or leaders who saw beyond borders and chose a legacy of unity? Will we be remembered for the wars we fought, or for the peace we chose while we still had the chance?